California plans to spend its way out of budget problems. Your online fantasy football that you love every weekend is about to be illegal here in the state of California. And Newsom gets hurt in his fee-fees, so he decides to sue Fox News. All that coming up on this episode of the California Underground podcast, starting right now. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into another episode of the California Underground podcast, the most trusted podcast for all things California politics. I am your host, Phil. We have a ton of stuff to get to tonight. 4 stories involving, 1, the budget. They have passed or come to an agreement on a budget, Newsom in the legislature, and I'm going to give you a little hint that it doesn't benefit everyday Californians. I know you're very shocked by that. We're going to talk about how California, the 4th largest economy in the world, supposedly is headed towards a huge recession or a possible recession. We're going to talk about that and why that is happening. Rob Bonta wants to ban you and your friends and family playing online fantasy football because, well, we follow the money and figure out why would you want to ban fantasy football. And then we finish off with Newsom wants to sue or has sued Fox News for $787 million because of defamation. So he's hurting the fee-fees, and we're going to talk about that. But first, if you haven't already, make sure you like, share, subscribe, comment if you are not a subscriber of the show, whether on audio or on YouTube. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in live all over. We're so happy to see all of you tonight on Tuesday before 4th of July. So let's get into our first topic for tonight, which is spending like a drunken sailor. California, we have a budget deal in place between the legislature and Gavin Newsom. They have gone back and forth about what they're going to spend their money on. It has gone up basically about 10% from last year, even though we're somehow facing a $12 billion budget deficit. I guess they plan on spending their way out of all of this problems, but we're going to get into who really benefits from this budget. And I'm going to do a little spoiler alert. It's not everyday Californians, so let's hop into it right now.
That's right. Alex, lawmakers in the Senate and the Assembly were hashing out the finer points of all of these bills today as they voted on them, what they liked, what they opposed. One thing then both chambers that members on both sides of the aisle brought up was funding for Prop 36. Passed by more than 2/3 of voters in November, Prop 36 allows harsher sentencing and mandated treatment for certain theft and drug crimes. Democrats put $100 million into the budget to fund it, which Republicans argue is not enough.
The voters voted to have Prop 36, but what good is it if you're not going to fund it? And not only are you not really funding it, we even reduced what the funding was to begin with. I had an amendment to fully fund this with $400 million, but obviously that wasn't heard and didn't go forward.
The administration this year said they expected the cases only to be about 3,600 cases. So what have we allocated? We have taken hard-earned money and we've allocated $100 million. And I assure you that as those cases increase, which I suspect that we will, we'll have to make additional adjustments.
Also in the budget, maintaining that controversial expanded Medi-Cal coverage to include low-income undocumented adults, albeit now with some new restrictions like a $30 monthly premium and freezing new enrollment for full-scope coverage after this year.
And of course, that means we're going to dip into our rainy day fund more and borrow some additional dollars.
I spoke with Chris McKaylee. He's an adjunct professor at McGeorge School of Law and expert on the operations of the state legislature. He says there are a handful of final budget-related bills that still need to be passed on Monday, so the legislature will convene again then. One of them involves CEQA reform, the California Environmental Quality Act. Proponents say it's an important tool for protecting species, habitats, and people in the face of land development. Critics say yes, but it can also be used to tie up projects in years-long bureaucracy, stalling and even killing development, including much-needed housing. Newsom has vowed to bring reforms, and one of the bills, Monday, aims to do just that. So important that McKaylee says the bill includes a provision he hasn't seen in more than 20 years at the Capitol.
That says if that bill, the CEQA reform bill, is not adopted, signed by the governor, the whole budget goes away. It's automatically repealed. I think that goes to show the public that the governor and legislature are very serious about significant CEQA reform in an effort to expedite the building of more affordable homes here in the state of California.
He says even though the budget closes that projected $12 billion gap, there is still financial uncertainty here in California. He says the Trump administration has threatened to revoke or cut off federal funding to California for everything from Medicare or Medicaid, which funds Medi-Cal here in the state, to high-speed rail and even education dollars. So whether those cuts come through and how severe they might be, we have yet to.
All right, so a lot to unpack there in the budget that has tentatively been agreed upon. Like I said, the governor came in, he proposed his budget. He wanted to pause Medi-Cal funding for illegal immigrants. The legislature, full of, far left statist Democrats, decided that that was unacceptable, that they had to include Medi-Cal. They came to a compromise that they would keep it in, but they would charge a $30 premium because that is going to, I guess, somehow cover the cost of Medi-Cal for all legal immigrants in the state. And I just want to do the math here. Now, again, I didn't become a lawyer because I'm great at math. I just want to break this down for you. According to Pew Research, and this is the research I found, there are about 2.6 illegal immigrants in the state of California. This was a couple years ago. And right now, it costs around $700 to $800 million a month to provide Medi-Cal for all legal immigrants a month. So keep that in mind. So if you charge them $34 or $30 a month, that comes out to around $78 million that Medi-Cal is taking in, while they're also paying out around $700 or $800 million. So they're only $622 million off. It's only that big of a discrepancy. So they came so close to covering that gap by $30. It's almost kind of insulting that they think the $30 is going to make a big difference for Medi-Cal. Keep in mind that money, Medicaid from the federal government, from the Trump administration, is going to be probably a tough fight because I don't think that President Trump, the way he's going with mass deportations and his stance on legal immigration, is going to be handing out a lot of federal dollars if he knows a lot of it, and almost $1 billion is going to illegal immigrants in California every month. Prop 36, we've talked about Prop 36 before. Incredibly popular proposition, a proposition that passed in the state of California by every single county. Every county voted for Prop 36. That is like historic in California politics, to get every single county in California to agree on one thing is probably the hardest thing in the world to do. So it happened and it passed 70% approval to 30% disapproval. And for some reason, for the people in Sacramento who crow about democracy and the power of the people and the power of the vote and all that stuff, people like Gavin Newsom in the state legislature here in California seem to not really be behind the idea of democracy when it doesn't work for them. So there's been this issue of Prop 36 is not properly being funded. They expected it to be around $400 million a year that they had to fund Prop 36. And this was something, again, the people voted on overwhelmingly, contrasted with the fact that 58% of Californians in a Public Policy Institute of California survey said that they did not support and were opposed to free Medi-Cal for illegal immigrants here in the state of California. Compare that with Prop 36, which was wildly popular. They don't want to fund Prop 36, but they will fund free Medi-Cal for illegal immigrants in the state. Just gives you an idea of the priorities here in the state of California and your legislators and your governor and what they really think of Californians and everyday Californians, because what you vote on doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's all, I guess, just a show for them to make it sound like democracy is a great idea. And then when they don't like it, they don't implement it. So that's those two big controversial issues. They did at least get $100 million. It's better than nothing. Gavin's initial budget, Old Noodles, his first budget was no money. We all know he hated Prop 36. He campaigned against it. He tried to pass a whole bunch of poison pills to kill Prop 36. He tried to do other measures for Prop 36. He tried to do all these press conferences showing him signing all these laws, saying we don't need Prop 36. He hates Prop 36. So it's an affront to his ego and his grasp on power when the people of California vote overwhelmingly against what he wants. So it was almost, I guess, for a lack of a better term, a big middle finger to the people of California when Gavin Newsom goes, here's my budget. It has no money for the one proposition that everybody supported, or mostly 70% of California voters supported. That just gives you an idea. There was this other thing that I want to get into. Gavin, again, with his power struggle, wanted to include a poison pill. And if you don't know what a poison pill is, what they call a poison pill in legislative government like this, when they're drafting bills and stuff like that, is that they will include a poison pill into some sort of bill, or in this case, the budget, where they say, if X happens, then this budget or this bill dies and goes away. The reason for that is it's like a negotiating tactic, with everybody who says, look, you either vote with me and you support this idea or it's going to go away. And basically he had this whole housing reform package where he said, you either support my housing reform package for CEQA and building housing, or there is this poison pill provision that the whole budget will go away and we have to start from scratch. Let's take a quick look at what he has to say about his poison pill.
Consequence of all of that, we have too much demand chasing too little supply. It's not complicated. This is Econ 101, supply-demand imbalance. I've said it before, I'll repeat it. This issue of housing explains more things in more ways on more days than any other issue to explain the challenges and the plight of so many Californians. So many of the challenges that ail us can be connected back to this issue. Unless we address this issue head on, we'll continue to be vexed by so many of these challenges as it relates to the challenges of the middle class and working folks, the issues of what's happening on our streets, in sidewalks. All of these things are foundationally and fundamentally connected.
So there's a spiel about affordable housing. They have talked about affordable housing. Scott Wiener is standing there. He's talked about affordable housing. Alex Lee, the infamous assembly member who is about 23, 24 years old. I don't know if he's super young, but I think he still lives in his mom's basement. Again, I don't know. Don't sue me for defamation. It's just a statement. They've all been talking about affordable housing for years and years and years. They don't seem to figure out the number one way to fix it when it comes to housing in California. In fact, when it comes to housing, basically anywhere in the country, let's just say, actually, when it comes to housing, basically, I'm going to say this, in the world, the number one thing government can do to help with affordable housing is they can get the hell out of the way. That's what government has to do. They just have to get out of the way and just stop with the regulations. CEQA is part of this. CEQA is an abomination. They need to scrap CEQA and start from scratch on CEQA. They have to admit defeat on CEQA. It's been abused. It has been overused. People use it now to hold a lot of cities and governments hostage, because what will happen is they want to build something or they want to start something. Then all of a sudden someone comes in, files a CEQA lawsuit. It's kind of a way to hold your project hostage and say, look, you either fight this out with me for the next 10 years, or you can just do what we want you to do. CEQA is an absolute abomination. So when it comes to affordable housing, the number one thing that I always say is that government has to get the hell out of the way. And Democrats in Sacramento, including Gavin Newsom, Scott Wiener, Alex Lee, all people like that, they don't understand that. They can't fathom the idea that government getting out of the way. They think government can solve everything. And so that was his poison pill. It did pass. It did get through. So his tactic did work. But I will say this, and this is something that I think is rightfully brought up about what Gavin Newsom did. It sets a precedent for governors going forward, and this is a very dangerous precedent, right? What he's saying is governors going forward can say, look, I want this one piece of legislation added into the budget, or the whole budget is going to go away. That is hostile negotiating. That is holding the budget and the state hostage to get what you want. And it is a very bad precedent. And I think it's worth calling out Gavin Newsom for setting this precedent of doing this. And I think it's a dirty trick that he did by doing this. But again, it's Gavin Newsom. I'm not surprised that he did pull such a dirty trick. But forget the fact that they ignored the will of millions of Californians who voted for Prop 36 and they're not funding that. Forget that 58% of Californians oppose giving free Medi-Cal to or cover free healthcare to illegal immigrants. Those are two things California support and then one thing that they don't support. Forget what everyday Californians want. There's another group that benefits from this budget bill. And I'm just going to say, it's not people like you and me. It's not the everyday people who are going to work. It's not everybody. It's not the everyday Californians. I'll give you one guess of who it is. It's not, okay, we already checked off illegal immigrants. They don't want to listen to you about crime and public safety. That's right. It's Hollywood. Hollywood is getting a huge $750 million infusion to the film and tax break. They're getting a huge tax break because if you don't know by now, they are getting absolutely demolished by places like Georgia. Georgia, we covered this in a previous episode where there is an uncapped amount of tax credits you can get in Georgia when you film there. Uncapped. And that's forever. That's uncapped forever. There is no limit on what you can do for exemptions. They basically open up the gates for the film industry to come out and film in Georgia. Bring your production companies, bring your crews out there. You are going to make a lot more money. It's going to be a lot more affordable to film in Georgia. California obviously has been lagging behind all of this. And they know that they're losing a ton of money because it's California, it's Hollywood. What else goes together? It's like peanut butter and jelly. Everyone thinks of California. They think we all live in Hollywood and we all live on the beach. So they gave this enormous tax break to California. Basically, it says the bill realized Newsom's ambitions. This is from the Hollywood Reporter. The bill realized Newsom's ambitions to increase the cap on California's film and television tax incentives from $330 million to $750 million a year, making the state the most generous outside of New York and Georgia. Like I just talked about, both their programs are uncapped, meaning, let's break it down a little bit. So it was $330 million. So you could get tax incentives up to that amount, $330 million. Now they've basically more than at least doubled it, because they want more people to be able to come here or work here and do their production companies here. New York and Georgia are uncapped, so you can just keep getting those tax incentives as much as you want. California, of course, has to put a limit on it. They can't let you get away with everything. They still need their pound of flesh. Though Newsom's proposal, first announced in the fall of 2024, was initially met with skepticism, it grew in popularity with the state assembly voting for the increase 64-1 and the Senate voting 31-3. Article goes on to talk about how this could help different production companies. If passed, the legislation would bring the most significant changes to the program since its inception in 2009. The state has steadily been losing production as other regions beef up their incentive programs for the entertainment industry. One example, earlier this month, Texas passed a law that increases by $100 million the amount allocated to movies and TV shows every 2 years. Now, I want to get this last quote in because I know there's some people who hit me up on social media, on Instagram, about this. I posted about this, and some people were like, oh, this is a good idea. This is a great thing. I'm going to explain why I don't think it's a great, I mean, there's probably some benefit, but let's get into this quote. It says, quote, "The program not only pays for itself, but generates economic activity." D.D. Myers, senior advisor to Newsom, shocker, at the UCLA Entertainment Symposium on Friday, "It's a good deal for taxpayers." It's a good deal for taxpayers, right? It's a great deal for taxpayers that they are going to be able to get, or that Hollywood is going to be able to get these enormous tax incentives. Isn't that great that everybody in Hollywood is going to get a nice tax incentive, and the rest of us in California are facing higher gas prices because of the gas excise, because of the lower carbon fuel standard. Taxes continue to go up, property taxes. I mean, it just continues and continues. City taxes continue to go up. Cities are broke, so they're figuring out how to charge you more for your public amenities and stuff like that. Wouldn't a great incentive to California in general? Why don't we just increase tax incentives for everybody in California, right? Why don't we just say, hey, California, we want to unleash the power of the people. We want to get this economic engine humming. Let's just give tax incentives to a ton of people, everybody in California. No, I disagree with old D.D. Myers' quote where she says it's a good deal for taxpayers, because that now has to be made up somewhere else in the budget. And let me tell you something. California does not like to reduce its spending, as we've seen with this current budget. They increased spending by about 10%, even though they were facing a $12 billion budget deficit, which they had to borrow from the rainy day fund. They had to borrow from themselves to fix the holes in California budget. That's what these games that they're up to. So this is, they say it's a good deal for taxpayers like you and me. I don't know if it's a good deal for us. What do we get out of it? What does it matter to me if the movie that I'm watching, and the movies that I don't really even go see movies that much anymore. The industry is really suffering right now. What difference does it to me if it's in California or in Georgia, right? Like, it doesn't really matter to me. I know there's people in LA, and if you watch, and if you're somebody out there and you're watching this and you're in the industry, this is amazing for you. This is all great. But my point is, why is it you carve out just for the Hollywood elites? Why is it you carve out just for the Hollywood elites and your buddies in Hollywood, and you're not giving tax incentives to normal, everyday Californians? That's my big question. It's not a great deal for taxpayers. We're still on the hook for all of this. We still have to probably make up all that money. So when they're not making as much taxes from Hollywood, right, because they've increased the incentives and all the stuff that they can write off, someone has to make that up. And it's going to be you and me. And they're going to figure out a way to make it up, because they did not cave on free healthcare for illegal immigrants. So that's something we're still paying for. Now they're giving huge tax incentives to Hollywood, which we're going to end up having to pay for. And they don't actually implement the stuff and put our tax dollars towards something that we all overwhelmingly supported. So to summarize, to give you an idea of the California budget that has just basically been passed by both the legislature and is going to be signed in by Gavin Newsom, there are the three people. Let's see. Actually, the priorities, I would say, are illegal immigrants are getting free healthcare. Hollywood is getting enormous tax breaks. And the stuff that we want, public safety, is not going to be funded, because screw you. We don't like what you're doing. And, I guess democracy only matters when it's something that you want. All right, let's get into some comments before we get into our next story. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. There are a ton of people on here. This is awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this Tuesday night. So I'm going to get into some of the comments. Someone said they're out in Palm Springs. That's awesome. So what up, Palm Springs? Went to Palm Springs recently, actually a year or so ago. First time, really like Palm Springs. There's a lot to do out in Palm Springs. Somebody says he can clean the streets. I'm assuming he's talking about Gavin Newsom. in San Francisco when his boss from China visits. The minimum wage failures continue after seeing the damage fast food did. This foolish admin does it worse for hospitality. Let's see. Good old use of the poison pill. Yep. How do you build more houses without power? Excellent question. That doesn't address the fact that it's very expensive to do anything here in California. Gavin doesn't want to fund Prop 36 because it'll show his incompetence in early release programs and closing prisons during his administration. Brett, you are 100% correct. This is my golden rule of politics. It applies to everybody, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everybody, is that politicians hate admitting they are wrong, right? They hate admitting they are wrong, and they will never, ever admit that they were wrong. So Prop 36 was a repudiation of Prop 47, which they got horribly wrong, and they do not want to admit that they were wrong. Slimeball Newsom is just trying to scam and steal more money. Government needs to get out of the way of everything. Agreed. More taxes we got to pay for these losers who don't want to work. Isn't it illegal for states to not pass an annual budget? Newsom trying to create leverage by saying he won't pass a budget unless it's that. Yeah, constitutionally, there is a deadline. I think it's July 7th is when they have to get a budget done. So that's sort of, it's July 1st. So I guess they figured there was a week, and he's kind of holding everybody hostage with that week. So he knows the deadlines. He knows exactly that there's deadlines, and he played it that way so that he could hold us hostage. All right. The legalization of marijuana has not yielded any relief to the economic conditions in the state. I would agree with that, because when I first thought they were going to legalize marijuana or weed recreationally here in the state, I thought that was going to be a new green rush. But leave it to California that they figured out how to kill the golden goose before it laid one golden egg. So all right, on to our next story. All right, fourth largest economy is set to face hard times coming up this year and probably into next year all the way till 2027. If we know anything about how much they love to brag about California is the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world, and it's such an amazing state because of the fact that we're the fourth or fifth. Gavin Newsom loves to talk about the fact that it is the fourth largest economy in the world, and they love to brag about the fourth largest economy in the world. And I say this, that I think the fourth largest or fifth largest, whatever, it goes back and forth. It kind of shifts back and forth years, a couple of years here and there. I think the economy is better despite what California does. I don't think there's anything that politicians can take credit for when it comes to the economy here in California. But there is something I want to kind of dig into a little bit more when it comes to this whole notion that is the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. People who are much smarter than me, who are economists, they figured this out and they've crunched the numbers. So when people say the fourth or fifth largest economy, you can say this. You can say, one, that the income inequality in California is on par with countries like Guatemala, right? Some of those countries that are, you would call third world countries, but countries that are not the countries you would think as the top economies in the world. So income inequality, probably on par with Guatemala. This also came out. California Governor says the state is now the fourth largest economy, but accounting for high cost of goods and services, California only barely edges out low-performing Italy, with the state's continued losses in private sector jobs and falling corporate and sales tax revenue, painting a darker picture of the Golden State's economy. California isn't keeping pace with the world. We're setting the pace, said Newsom on a 2024 economics ratings. Our economy is thriving because we invest in people, prioritize sustainability, and believe in the power of innovation. However, this is where the smart economists come in. After accounting for purchasing power parity, how much can be purchased in the local economy with local currency, which provides a more accurate comparison. California economy is ranked 11th at 3.6 trillion. 11th. So falls almost double, more than double than what it is. So 4th to 11th. So when you hear this refrain all the time, you'll see it on social media, and people will always come back with that sort of argument of, well, yeah, California's the fourth largest economy. I guess we're doing something right. No, actually, when you account for the purchasing power of Californians, and I'm sure people who are watching this can attest to this and leave it in the comments, it's closer to 11th. You don't have a lot of the purchasing power here in California is much tougher. It is a high cost of living. Everything is more expensive, as we've talked about, between the taxes, regulations, utilities. I mean, power companies alone are gouging everybody. So it tumbles all the way down to 11th. There's this next thing. California's March jobs report confirms a troubling trend. This is from this past March. So this is why they're predicting that California is facing a recession. And this budget that is coming out, and I want to refer back to this budget that just came out, is it was passed what they called on a hope. Basically, a hope that the economy would get better and that the revenues would improve. They passed this budget hoping that everything's going to turn out all right and that the economy is going to get better. Well, it looks like that hope may be fleeting because the state's private sector is contracting while employment growth is increasingly driven by government-funded programs. This is not a sustainable path to economic vitality. We need to focus on policies that encourage private sector investment and job creation rather than relying on taxpayer-funded employment to drive our economy forward. The March preliminary jobs report found the state lost a net 11,600 jobs, while the February jobs loss of 7,500 was adjusted to a loss of 21,800. Let me say that again. The February jobs loss of 7,500 was adjusted. So they went back and looked at the numbers again. This happens a lot with these numbers that get pumped out. They will release the numbers and then they will go back and adjust the numbers. It was really a loss of 21,800 jobs. That's not a little oopsie boo-boo. That is a huge discrepancy between 7,500 jobs and almost 22,000 jobs lost in California. And these are private sector jobs. The state lost 26,800 private sector jobs from February to March while gaining 15,200 government and government-supported jobs. The only job growth in the state of California, the only job growth that we are seeing is the government. Expanding the government, more government jobs, creating a larger budgetary requirement. That is the only thing that is helping keep employment afloat here in California. And you want to talk about what's a good deal for taxpayers. This is not a good deal for taxpayers because the more government-funded jobs that are going to be created means there's more strain on the citizens of California who are going to have to end up supporting those jobs. And every year the budget is going to increase, even if they are facing tens of billions of dollars in budget deficits because of the revenue, because corporations are leaving, businesses are leaving, people are leaving, private sector jobs are leaving. This is an unsustainable model for California. Quite literally, California is on an economic calamity. It is on course for economic disaster because there is a huge decline in private sector jobs month over month. And the only jobs that are getting added right now are government-funded jobs. And where does the government get money? Government doesn't create money. Remember that government doesn't create capital. Government only job, the only way they can get it is they take it from you. That is the only way that they create capital. So when they create a job, They have to take capital from somewhere else. It is not like a private sector job that creates capital or that creates more capital coming into the state, creates more money, creates more commerce, creates a better economy, which is what private sector jobs do. The government then has to take money from those private sector jobs and those private sector people who are working, and through taxes, whether it's one way or the other, and they have to fund these government jobs. And now you have a steep decline in private sector jobs. Businesses and corporations are leaving. Those revenues are going out the window. Yet the amount of government jobs in the budget keeps going up. That's why we're on a bad y-axis of, y-axis like on the graph. We are headed towards a critical point where sooner or later there's not going to be enough people paying into the system for the government to support all of these government jobs. And it looks great on paper, and it looks great for Gavin Newsom to go out there and say, oh, look at us, we're the fourth largest economy, we're the fifth largest, whatever you want to say, in the world. Not true. It's easy if you're pumping and filling out the jobs and pumping the jobs out yourself from the government. Not great when the private sector jobs are running scared for the hills. So California on an economic calamity. This might even be worse. It might be worse than a recession, because California might be on the verge of a huge financial crisis. And I'm just going to lay out the picture, and I don't want to really depress all of you on a Tuesday night. Let's lay out what California is facing right now. They passed a $320 billion budget for next year. Now, they did some borrowing and some funny accounting tricks to make all that budget deficit go away. Quick sleight of hand. Increased, but they did some quick sleight of hand to balance the budget, because they are constitutionally required to balance the budget. States have to balance their budget. They can't be like the federal government, just run up a huge debt. So that's problem number one. It's based on a hope that the economy will get better. What we're seeing now is the economy is not going to get better because private sector jobs are leaving. That's problem number one. The three, I'd say, largest cities in California are all facing enormous budget deficits. San Diego, LA, and San Francisco, talked about that before. They're all facing enormous budget deficits. They're broke. So the state budget is doing all this, voodoo to make it look like a balanced budget. The cities are in a huge budget deficit, so that is a problem. And no one ever talks about the big, huge, stinking elephant in the room of California, that we have over $1 trillion in unfunded pension liability in the state of California that we have no idea how we're going to pay for, right? With all these government jobs that go out, there's going to be more pensions that have to be sent out, right? More pensions promised to these government workers. And that number is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they never tell you how they're going to pay for it. They have no idea how they're going to pay for it. It's $1 trillion. It is the enormous stinking elephant in the room when it comes to our economy. So we may be facing in 2026, we have a gubernatorial election. There's good candidates who are jumping in. If you're paying attention, this is why I always say local elections matter, because 2026 could be very consequential to the future of California. So it's very important you pay attention to who is running to be at the helm next year for California governor. Hopefully it's not Kamala Harris, because that would be a disaster. But we are on basically a certain economic calamity, on course for an economic calamity coming up this next year. So, all right, let me get a drink of water before we hop into our next story. Check out the comments. You guys are just blowing it up right now. It's awesome. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. As I always say, we do this live every Tuesday so that you guys can be a part of the platform. You guys can let your voices be known. Hey, new feature. I'm going to say this right now. If you go to californiaunderground.live, which is our website, we just revamped our whole website. If you go to contact us, there is a button where you can record a voice message. It's like you calling into the show. So if you want to call into the show through a voice message, you can do so. All right. So I was like, I'm not moving to Florida because Roman is problem number one is the Democrats' supermajority forcing the Green New scam and funding non-citizens. Yeah, sustainability. I would agree with that. Especially when you look at the fact that solar and stuff like that was an incentive for people to go out and get, and now it's not. They're switching that up. So, you know, the utility companies who are mad that they're not getting as much money anymore because everyone's going out and getting solar and basically charging their own houses or powering their own houses. They're now switching it so that you are required to buy it back from the electric company. I heard he will tax us to move out of California. I heard that as well. That was called they proposed a California exit tax. They were trying to do that on certain people. I believe, in my humble opinion, I think that is a violation of the U.S. Constitution Privilege and Immunities Clause. If you move to another state, you can't reach into that state and say, no, we're going to keep taking income tax from you. I don't think it works like that. That would be a huge lawsuit on the constitutional, like national, federal level. Hotels in California are leaving because of the minimum wage hike just in time for the Olympics. Yeah, down here in San Diego, they're trying to raise it to $25 an hour. Is there any hope? I believe there is hope. Yeah, I think there is hope. The people who are on here right now watching this makes me think there's hope. And when people support Prop 36 the way they did last, I think there's hope. I think there's hope, and I think more and more people just have to not be afraid to speak up about these issues and just be, you know, out and proud about their beliefs. I think there's more people who don't believe in this style of governance than there are I think there are less people, there are less status in California than people believe. So that's why I'm saying there is hope. There's always hope, right? I wouldn't be doing this podcast if I didn't think there was hope. So, all right. Next story. Fantasy football. Your favorite weekend activity to keep you and the boys and the gals together and, some trash talk and stuff like that. In the state that says they want to be as free as possible, they want to ban your ability to play fantasy football or fantasy sports in general. Rob Bonta came out this week. He plans on issuing a legal opinion in a couple days about whether or not fantasy sports classify as online sports gambling. So let's watch a quick clip about that.
Fantasy sports facing an uncertain future in California. California's Attorney General Rob Bonta is soon expected to release what's called a legal opinion, deeming the platforms illegal in the state.
Well, I think it's credible. I think it's important that he's responding.
It will come after two Republican state lawmakers, including Assemblyman Tom Lackey, sent a letter and followed up with Bonta, requesting he look into the issue. Online sports gambling is illegal in California, and the lawmakers say fantasy is a gray area. This after voters in 2022 overwhelmingly rejected legalizing online sports betting.
And so I was very interested in making sure that the people and their opinion was at least acknowledged. And so we followed up on that, and we wanted the legal opinion to make sure that it wasn't in conflict with what the people want.
But fantasy sports operators don't want this. In a statement provided to KCRA3, the Coalition for Fantasy Sports said, quote, "This opinion would be devastating news to the millions of California sports fans who love to play fantasy sports. We hope the Attorney General's office will consider the views of sports fans across the state before making a decision. Californians have been playing daily fantasy sports games for more than a decade, and it is shocking to think the state would suddenly take them away."
So I have Aaron Judge. He's playing for the Yankees, obviously. He's the best hitter in the AL, maybe the best hitter in the game.
I checked in with expert and Sacktown radio sports talk show host Carmichael Dave. He was in the middle of a round of golf when I told him the news.
This is still a busy time in fantasy sports.
Yeah, it may not be the busiest time for your main sports. The NBA just ended. NFL is still a ways away, but you've got baseball, you've got golf, you've got mixed martial arts, you'll have the occasional boxing match. Look, People will they will bet on which pigeon will fly the furthest. You'll find a play when you want it.
How do you expect the fantasy sports community in California to react?
Well, they're going to be, I think, understandably, very upset. It's a large hypocrisy. Now, I'm not a gambler and I don't encourage gambling, but I will tell you, they're going to think, for example, why can I bet on this latest crypto scheme by opening up Coinbase, which is available to anybody? Why can I bet my life savings on that? Why can I bet my life savings on Robinhood or any of these other stock apps? But I can't bet on whether or not the Giants or the Niners or the Kings are going to win a ball game. It's absolute hypocrisy.
All right. I want to talk about this because this is whenever something like this, head scratching, comes up, the first thing I do, and you can do this as well, whenever you see a news story that makes you scratch your head and go, why would somebody do this? Like, why is this so important to them? Why does Tom Lackey and Scott Wilk, and mind you, these are both Republicans, why would they care about fantasy sports? Like, why would Tom Lackey go out of his way to say, oh, well, they voted down online sports gambling several years ago, so I wanted to take it upon myself to ask the Attorney General, well, is this in line with what the people of California want? I don't think when we voted on Prop 27, I don't think people were thinking of their weekend online fantasy sports football league. I don't think that's what people were thinking about. I don't think they were thinking about whether or not the March Madness pool that they do in their office was part of whatever this sports gambling proposition was. I don't think that's what people were thinking about. So here's what you can do. There is a great site called followthemoney.org, an amazing site. You can literally put in any candidate, any contributor, unions, all of that stuff, and it connects you and shows you all of the information related to candidates. And this is what I do personally. And I encourage you to go and do this if there's ever something that you find questionable or that you sit there and go, I don't understand why someone would think this is a priority. First thing you can do is follow the money. And 9.9 times out of 10, you'll find the answer to it. So here is the breakdown of Rob Bonta. Okay, so here's all the money that he's made or that has been given to him as a politician. I want to point out tribal governments have given him $421,900 since he's been running for office. So almost $500,000. Gambling casinos have given him $288,000. That's a lot of money. They almost gave him close to $1 million. And these are the top. So I ranked it in the top industries, and you can say unions are always the top. Unions always get up there. Lawyers and lobbyists make sense as well. Health professionals and healthcare unions have a lot to do with California policy. Unions, general trade unions, public sector unions like the California Teachers Association, stuff like that. Public sector unions, I think, are just an absolute abomination. I don't think there should be public sector unions. But you go down, you see tribal governments and gambling and casinos. Okay? And then you go over to Scott. Is this Scott Wilk? So he's the one who wrote the letter. And then, you can go down. Tribal governments, $192,000 was given to him. You go down a little bit more, and then gambling casinos. So he still got around $42,000. Tom Lackey, who was an assemblyman, he got another 192,000 gambling casinos. He got 69,000, so he got more than Scott Wilk. And the reason I bring this up is because you can always look at and follow the money as to why this is so darn important to someone like Tom Lackey. And the California, let me pull this up. The California Gambling Nation, Indian Gambling Association issued a letter fully in support of this, saying that, yes, we support you banning fantasy sports. And if you are connecting the dots already and you're paying attention, kudos to you, because I think you're smart enough to figure out where I'm going with this. Who spent the most money to kill Prop 27? So you couldn't put $5 on your favorite player to hit a home run, or you wanted to put $20 on a football team to cover the spread or something like that in California, where the rest of the country is doing online sports gambling. I'm not a fan of online sports gambling, but I'm a fan of people being free to do what they want. California doesn't want you to do that. Who was the number one opposing funder of who wanted to take down Prop 27? And it's very easy that it was the casinos. It was the tribal casinos here in California, because they wanted to set it up so that they could make money themselves. So again, if you're connecting the dots here, follow the money. Tom Lackey, Scott Wilk, top funders of tribal governments and gambling casino. Rob Bonta has made almost close to $1 million in campaign contributions from tribal governments and casinos. You can put 2 and 2 together and figure out what's going on here. When you look at Prop 27, who spent the most amount of money to kill Prop 27 so there wasn't online sports gambling? Also the tribal casinos. So it comes down to, well, who wants their cut? And that's what it comes down to. In a state that says it's all about freedom, and all about freedom to, if you want to be a minor and do a sex transition and the state will pay for it, that's the type of freedom they believe in. But your fantasy football, no, we can't have your fantasy football. And Tom Lackey's answering a question that nobody asked. He's literally saying, well, I think the people of my district want to know what the answer is. Nobody's asking that answer or that question. Nobody's asking that question. Tom, no one's asking that question. No one thought when they talked about Prop 27 that it would include their weekend fantasy football league. No one thought that. So when it comes down to it, my lesson for this is whenever there is a head scratching bill or action coming out of Sacramento or anywhere, always follow the money and you'll get your answer. All right. Checking in on the comments again before we hit our last story. Getting a drink of water. Thanks for tuning in, Peter. See ya. Thanks for everyone for tuning in tonight. And you can always check out our podcast on audio. People who listen on audio, thank you as well. Spotify, Apple, Google, all those places. We're all over the map. Again, if you want to check out our new website, californiaunderground.live, we just re-updated the whole website, made it nice and clean, nice and easy to access. CARB is another agency that needs to go away now. That is 100% true. CARB is out of control. This is going to, I agree with Rat Eye. This is something that is going to tick off people. It's weird. There are things that people will not pay attention to that I could talk about, but your fantasy football, people will pay attention to that and they'll be like, wait a second, you're going to ban my fantasy football? That seems a little out of control. You're going to do a show about CARB and the demise of the due to the big, beautiful bill. They're going to get rid of fuel blends. I've talked about CARB. I've talked about Lyanne Randolph. I did an episode on that, or I did a video on that. You can go check it out. It was a very good video. Probably the best video we've done in the past month or so. Got a ton of views. Go check that out, Lyanne Randolph. It's always Jonathan Hughes. It's always about the money with the state of California. Yep, that is sure. You can always follow the money. All right. Last story of the day, and then I'll finish up with more of your comments, and then we'll end for tonight. All right. Presidential hopeful and preening governor Gavin Newsom got hurt in the fifis by Fox News. So he decided to get tough and do what every tough guy does when he gets hurt in his fifis. He ran to court and filed a lawsuit. Gavin Newsom is filing a lawsuit for $787 million against Fox News over the issue of when did he call President Trump? I'm not kidding. That is quite literally the entire premise of this lawsuit is, did it happen on this day or did it happen on this day? And Gavin Newsom is suing specifically for $787 million because that was the amount that Dominion Voting won against Fox News for defamation due to the 2020 election. And we'll get into this. I would love to show you a clip of what he said about this. I would love to show you a clip of old Noodles talking about this. But he doesn't let you. And this is really funny. Not really dealing with the story. This is really funny. He does not let you show clips anymore. What he does is any clips of him now that are out there, he says they are copyrighted by iHeartRadio because of his podcast. Even clips that have nothing to do with his podcast get copyright strikes. So he literally is hiding behind his podcast and using iHeartRadio to copy strike YouTube creators like myself or podcasters who want to talk about it. So I'd love to show you his video explaining why he is doing this. Usually I love to show you a clip or something like that. But in this case, I don't want the channel to get a copyright strike. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to have to talk about it. I'm going to have to show you just something from Cal Matters. So Governor Gavin Newsom is suing Fox News for defamation, claiming the network, claiming the network lied about the date he last spoke with President Donald Trump on the phone and accused the governor of lying about the call by disregarding basic journalistic ethics in favor of malicious propaganda. Fox continues to play a major role in the further erosion of the bedrock principles of informed representative government, the lawsuit reads. The lawsuit, filed Friday by Newsom as an individual, seeks $787 million in damages from the network, roughly the same amount that Fox News agreed to pay Dominion Voting Systems in 2023 to settle a defamation case over the network's election claims. Newsom promised to drop the suit if Fox News retracts its claim that Newsom lied and issues a formal apology. So that is why he is suing, because it's literally about a day. It's about the day, right? Fox said in a statement that it would defend the case vigorously. Quote, Governor Newsom's transparent publicity stunt is frivolous and designed to chill free speech, critical of him, kind of like copyright striking any video that you show of Gavin Newsom now, because he doesn't want you critiquing anything he says on YouTube. So now what he does is he copyright strikes all of the creators who are out there. And it's literally about a day. It's literally about what day, because the issue was Governor Newsom said, I never spoke with President Trump. President Trump released his call record saying, nope, here's Governor Newsom calling me on this day. And now he's saying, well, I called him on a different day. And he's saying they called me on this day. And it all relates to Jesse Waters, who said that Gavin Newsom was lying. That's the entire lawsuit. So $1 billion lawsuit is because of the fact that it was a different day. So whether or not he spoke with Donald Trump, which was basically what he disputed in the beginning, saying he never spoke with President Donald Trump over the riots that were going on in LA. He did speak with President Trump, but it was on a different day. And then Jesse Waters calls him out on it and says, you're a liar that you didn't talk to him. Now, all of a sudden, this has become the whole issue. And I'm just going to say this, as someone who believes he's running for president in 2028, because we all know he's going to run in 2028. I don't know if this is the greatest look to be the tough guy who, when you get your feelings hurt over stuff like this, you rush to file a lawsuit. And we all know it's a publicity stunt. We all know he's doing this because he wants to raise his awareness or take on Trump. Every Democratic governor across the country is trying to take on Trump in one way or another. I guess this is his way of taking on Trump, is that he's going to file a lawsuit. And it all comes down to, well, if Jesse Waters retracts it and says he's sorry on Fox News, then I'll make the whole thing go away. So I guess it wasn't that, devastating to him for defamation, it wasn't that devastating for him, or it didn't damage his reputation anymore if he's willing to apologize and move on with it. I will say this about defamation of public figures. There is a high bar when it comes to public figures, and specifically politicians in the United States, and even more so in California. Actually, under the California Constitution, it's actually broader. The protection of free speech is broader under the California Constitution than it is under the First Amendment, which is pretty crazy if you think about that. They want to encourage speech. They want to encourage, well, when the drafters came up with it, they want to encourage free speech. They want to encourage people to talk about what's going on in public affairs. Public affairs, politicians, stuff like that are the ultimate protection. That was what founders, like who wrote the U.S. Constitution, that was the people who wrote the California Constitution, believed was of paramount importance, was that citizens should be able to talk about public officials and be protected for their speech and not be worried about someone's going to sue me or I'm going to be in trouble for that. So the California Constitution actually protects even more. In fact, there was a case, I remember I had researched this a while ago, and the public official sued somebody because they had a website where they basically went on and on and on, called him all these horrible things about nothing to do with him as a politician, how he was a scumbag, how he was, less of a man, stuff like that. It was he basically went on this whole rant on his website. Public official sued him, said this is defamation. It's harming me. It's public harm to myself and to my reputation. The court sided with the guy with the website and said, look, you're a public figure. Everything goes. So sorry, that's the free speech under the California Constitution. It's a free speech under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. I'm sorry. So at the end of the day, not the greatest look for old Noodles that he's trying to be tough against Donald Trump by suing Fox News, because that's not taking it to Donald Trump. Suing Fox News is not taking it to Donald Trump. I don't know how that's supposed to make him look tougher to Donald Trump. It's just his fight with Fox News, which he likes to go on, by the way. So it's interesting he sues Fox News even though he likes going on Fox News. But let me know in the comments what you think about Gavin Newsom and whether or not this is just another weak move or a weak publicity stunt on his part to try and get some notoriety and to look tough before the 2028 election. All right. Got a couple minutes here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was a wild night. You guys were killing it in the chat. Thank you for tuning in live. Again, I think the 8 o'clock on Tuesday seems to work for everybody. Brett says, hey, Gavin, ever heard of Discovery? He's so dumb. Remember the lady in the Palisades and Gavin was on the phone with Trump but could not get a signal? Yep. Yeah, I remember that. He said he was on the phone with the president, and then he said, I'm trying to get to the president. Let's see. Sorry, I'm a lot disgusted with the Democrats in California. The status, yep. I'd like to know if he's using taxpayer money for his stupid lawsuit. He's not. I had to double check that. That was my first question. He's not. He's doing this as an individual. I wouldn't be surprised if he's using campaign fund or like Campaign for Democracy is his PAC that he has. A frivolous lawsuit, Rada. Yeah, yep. No one in the state of California likes Gavin Newsom. Jonathan, I think you're completely right. I have yet to meet an ardent Gavin Newsom supporter, which is great. I haven't met someone who's like, I love Gavin Newsom. There are people who love politicians and they have pictures of them and they think they're amazing. I have yet to meet one person, especially in a blue city like San Diego. I've yet to meet one person who loves Gavin Newsom or really likes Gavin Newsom. Just finishing up some quote or chats here. Just want to make sure I recognize you guys for all being here and hanging out with me on this Tuesday night. Doesn't the Fair Use Act of 1976 bar everyone from enforcing a copyright strike? Yes. Excellent point, Brett. It is fair use. He's a politician. You can use it in a transformative way. If you're commenting on something, we had done an episode on his first podcast episode, and we got dinged because you're not supposed to use his footage. So stuff like I've been showing, like news clips and stuff like that, that's fair use because it's news. It's dissemination of public information. News is considered something that has to be publicly disseminated. The clip of him at the press conference with Scott Wiener, that is fair use because it's more public affairs, stuff like that. But even then, if you're using something, you're commenting on it, that's fair use. But this is a very, this is a new area where Gavin Newsom's using iHeartRadio to copyright strike channels. There was one guy who got hit hard with it. It's another podcast he was talking about, Gavin Newsom. He got hit with a copyright strike for using it. The Frog Feeder, I just found this channel. I like it. Thanks for finding us, The Frog Feeder. Welcome to the channel. Is Trump going to stop being president if they sue him for defamation? No, I don't think so. I don't think Trump is worried about that. So, Butte County is MAGA red. It's interesting the amount of red that's actually in California outside of the like blue cities. Like if you actually look at like a breakdown of precincts in California, there's a lot of red. So Gavin Newsom needs to resign. I don't think he will ever plan on resigning. Again, it's that whole idea of him. Politicians don't like to admit that they're wrong. Newsom has done nothing but losses lately. He is done. He won't make it past the primary if he even tries. The primary is going to be interesting. I'm interested to see the Democratic primary. Get your popcorn. Yeah. Hello, silent viewers. Thank you, Brett, for bringing them up. Thank you, Brett, for supporting. They're also trying to take our roosters, not the roosters, AB 928. I'm gonna have to look into that. I know Camille is a big, she has chickens as well. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, all that stuff. Good luck, California will get worse unless it turns red. San Francisco. I've always said that, you know, red is a long way away. I will take purple. AB 928. I might have to look into that, the Frog Feeder, and I might have to do a quick video on AB 928 that they're taking away roosters. That's pretty crazy. I will say this. To those in the chat right now who are watching and tuning in, I would take in 5 years, let's say 5 to 7 years, I would take a purple California in a heartbeat. A purple California is a heck of a lot better than a deep blue California. I'm just saying, it's a competitive state. It would be a swing state. Purple California would be way better. You have to progress. This is politics. Things slowly change. Has to go from deep blue to purple, and then it kind of moves. So we'll see the progression. But hey, you know, 48% of Californians said that they are willing to consider voting for a Republican governor in 2026. So who knows? Crazy things have happened. I'm just going to say that. And that's why somebody brought up, is there any hope? I think there is. There's always hope. And I will say this, I'll probably end the show just like this. When I first started doing this podcast, things were pretty bleak. But I feel like over the, how many years I've been doing this since 2018, I feel like there's a lot of people paying attention now. And it's slowly changing. And I think there's hope. So, all right. That's our show for tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you like the show, make sure you obviously like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that notification bell. That helps as well. Also on Spotify, Google, make sure you leave a review. Reviews help with the audio podcast, helps people find us more. And we will see you on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.